Okay, in today's episode, we're talking about a subject that's very important. If gold and silver price is manipulated, why even invest in precious metals? And the price manipulation of gold and silver has been quite blatant recently. And I've seen it deter some people. They said, well, why would I even invest in something that clearly has a manipulated price? We've seen JP Morgan and other major organizations even pay fines for spoofing the price, manipulating the short-term price of metals. And so this is an important question. And today we're talking to none other than my good friend, Mr. Steve Penny. He is the creator of the Silver Chartist newsletter. I think it is the best free newsletter I've ever seen. And I say this every time, but I'm not just talking about free newsletter for gold and silver. I think it's the best free newsletter I've ever seen out of any industry. And I told Steve that. I always joke with Steve. I say, Steve, you went too far on this free newsletter. Your free newsletter is too good. And so that's just kind of Steve's personality. So right there down below, you can go ahead and you can sign up to the free newsletter, which breaks down gold, silver, mining stocks. He shows what he's buying. He shows what he's selling. He shows how to measure what's worth buying, what's worth not buying. He also covers uranium, which is an awesome added bonus. And I've had many people write me that with fantastic gains, actually, since signing up to your newsletter in the uranium industry, they signed up for your newsletter and have done great in uranium. So the link to that is in the description right there down below, and it's pinned to the comments. So go ahead and sign up to the Silver Chartist for free right now. Make sure you hit the like button right over there on this side, right over there on this side. Comment down below, Steve rules, right there down below if you enjoy having Steve on. Last but not least, thanks to our channel sponsor, which is Vizsla Silver. Vizsla Silver. So thank you, Mike, for being our sponsor, and be sure to check out Vizsla Silver. And good to see you, Steve.
Yeah, good to see you, Jake. Thanks again for having me on.
All right, Steve, I already did a very long intro and I'm out of breath. So here's a quick question. Why do we invest in gold and silver if it's manipulated?
You shouldn't. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Should we end the video now?
That. Yeah. No. So first of all, I've always believed that silver and gold are the most manipulated markets on the planet. And it's good to see, this being brought to light now. And, those people who have denied the manipulation really can't deny it any longer. I mean, silver and gold are heavily manipulated. So which does bring up the natural question. That's the logical thing to ask yourself. Well, then why would I invest in it, right? So number one, I think all markets are manipulated, just not to the extent that silver and gold are. And one thing we have to also ask ourselves is, was silver and gold manipulated in the 1970s run? And then more recently, from 1999 to 2011? Silver was certainly manipulated along the way, especially from 2008 to 2011. And it still rose, went from, $4 or $5 in the early 2000s up to 50 in 2011. So price can still rise in a manipulated market. And I think they can manage the trend. But more importantly is that all manipulations fail. They all do. You can look at the London gold pool in the 1970s, and the bankers were almost overrun in 2011. And I think manipulation, although it disgusts me because everyday people get hurt, if you understand it and you know about it, you can use it to your advantage. For example, you can use these ridiculous sell-offs that make no sense whatsoever as opportunities to accumulate. And that's what the big money is doing. I like to say, follow the money. JP Morgan is buying hand over fist. China is buying hand over fist. Central banks around the world are buying hand over fist. They're evil, but they're not stupid. And I consider them to be the smart money. So eventually this is all going to turn around, and eventually the manipulation is going to be to the upside when it suits them. So we can use this to our advantage, as criminal and corrupt as it is.
So let's talk a little bit about this idea that manipulation actually creates opportunity. And right now, of course, we do see that gold and silver move with real rates, but they should be correcting from a much higher vantage point than they're at right now. And one of the things that's presented that to me is an opportunity to get more exposure to physical metals, which just 4 months ago, you pretty much missed the boat. I mean, you would have been paying over $2,000 an ounce for gold, basically, and well over 40 an ounce for silver. And so it does present from a physical metals perspective, but then also from a mining stock perspective, because what happens when you manipulate the price of something? Well, what happens is you distort supply and demand fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And the ironic thing about that is it works until it doesn't, because you get to a point where when you have a silver market where 70% of it comes from industrial use, and the macroeconomic climate of people's distrust for fiat currency is driving retail demand as well at a near or close to record high. What happens when when people keep saying, well, the price still isn't that bad, and so it's causing people to continue to chip away at that 30%, which distorts the market in the available market, which ultimately presents a fantastic opportunity for the price to have a significant correction. It's a similar type of setup in uranium as well, obviously different dynamics, but one where the price needs to be astronomically higher, and it presents an interesting opportunity to ride the wave of that. Would you say that that is an accurate assessment, that the manipulation presents an opportunity? Do you agree with me? And if so, anything you would add to that?
I think you said that perfectly. There's really not much to add. I mean, that was perfectly said. For the listeners, I'd go back and listen to that again, because you said that so perfectly. And just to piggyback on one thing you said, the 70% industrial demand, roughly 30% retail demand, it's the use of physical silver in industry is growing. And that is a tailwind for silver. That's a bullish factor. However, it's the investment demand that's going to really cause it to skyrocket. It's the investment demand that's going to see, this be an epic bull market. And interestingly, I don't have the data in front of me, so I'm going from memory, but I think it's the last couple months, for the first time in years, investment demand actually superseded or eclipsed industrial demand on a monthly basis. So it's a short. Is this a short-term move, or is it a long-term trend? But that's certainly a very encouraging sign. And there's a lot of smart money that jumps in and buys these dips, and you eventually get to a point where maybe they drive the paper price down, but any drop in the paper price is then offset by a corresponding rise in premiums. So, for example, if they drive the price of silver down by $2, well, then the premiums just go up $2, and you're still paying the same price for the physical. And that's what we saw back in the beginning of February during that just absolutely blatant manipulation on the silver squeeze.
Yeah, I interviewed Jim Rogers a little while ago, and we were talking about gold, and he was saying, you got to buy it. And I said, when's your next big buying spree? And this was when it was closer to $2,000. Silver was real close to 30. And he's saying, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the sentiment. And so I kind of thought he was a little crazy, because I'm like, there's no way, but it's interesting to see that, because it really does present an opportunity, especially for someone like that, that's, got some capital to spend. All of a sudden, every macro fundamentals align, but he's able to scoop up silver at such a discount and gold at such a discount. And then one of the other things that I find interesting about the manipulation is it really matters with mining stocks, especially when so much is traded off algos and everyone's doing their mathematical calculations. So while the price doesn't reflect reality, it can present a really good opportunity if you know what you're doing in mining stocks, because most people don't understand it. Do you agree with me on that it can also present a good opportunity in mining stocks, the manipulation?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of these miners base their projections on like $1,500 gold and say $22 silver. That's their base case. And, if they continue to manipulate the price lower, and there's a disconnect between, the paper price and what you actually pay to get your hands on the physical, there's nothing to keep those miners from selling directly to the corporations at the actual physical price. So that certainly presents plenty of opportunity for them. And I give a lot of credit to the very few mining stocks and mining executives who acknowledge this opportunity. Guys like Keith Neumeyer, who you have on your show all the time. I mean, he's someone who gets it. And, that gives me confidence in investing in companies like that.
So one thing that is pretty interesting is the paper price creates basically a facade that you don't see what's happening behind the scenes. And behind the scenes, what's happening is China, I believe it was Poland yesterday, said that they're going to be buying an incredible amount of gold, the government or the central banks of Poland. And so you're seeing this type of buying, but then we've also seen on the silver side, the year-over-year mining output decreased in 2020. And the reality is the industrial demand is going up. Do you think that this type of a squeeze on the price due to a supply and demand issue is a real possibility?
Yes, absolutely. And I would go a step further and say it's not a possibility. It's an inevitability. It's a question of when, not if, the supply demand fundamentals fully assert themselves. And, I look at the manipulation as like, I don't base my investment thesis on a default of the COMEX or anything like that. That's not my primary investment thesis. However, it's a real possibility. That's it's just an added upside kicker, all of this manipulation. If this really unfolds in a big way and like it's fully exposed, I mean, that would add so much fuel to the already existing bullish fundamentals. And that's another just way to think about it, is we can use this to our advantage. Now, I'm not endorsing it, of course. I don't like it. It makes me sick, these criminals. I think about the mining companies that, there's real people working at these mines and employers, their bonuses. What about the mine workers, the guy down there digging? They would be able to get paid so much better and create more jobs and all this if there was a true free market in the metals. So I'm not endorsing it, but it does create opportunities for us as investors.
So what about playing the other side of the trade? I'm not sure if you heard, but I had Rick Rule on last week, and in my interview with him last week, he actually said that. He said, the price manipulation or whatnot doesn't concern me, because I think when it's time, they play both sides. Mm-hmm. And what's your assessment on that?
Yeah. And first of all, I did listen to that interview. I listen to every interview you have, especially when you have Rick Rule on. He's someone, when he speaks, I listen. And he's been doing this for a long time. And I agree 100%. And, I've said this a few times on your show, but it always resonates with me. I know your channel is growing really fast, so maybe people haven't heard me say this, but, I had the opportunity to speak with Jim Sinclair a few years ago. And one of the things that I remember is he said, when this thing goes, they're going to manipulate it to the upside. And he was an epic insider, in the 1980s run. He called the top to the day. And, I think he's going to be 100% correct. And you see that right now. JP Morgan is acquiring physical metal hand over fist. Why are they doing that? They're going to participate in this bull run when it goes. And I like to think of the manipulation as like every time they manipulate it, it's like taking a beach ball and just pushing it underwater. And the further you push it down, just eventually it's going to pop. And the more you push it down, the higher it's going to go.
So when Jim Sinclair said that, he's saying that the people or the institutions that are accumulating the metals will eventually play the other side of it. Is that what he's referring to?
Yes. Yeah. The big bankers will participate. And, assuming the paper markets don't blow up, they'll probably manipulate that to the upside as well.
Now, what do you think would happen to regular people like you and I that are invested in gold, silver, or mining stocks when something like that occurred, if it was manipulated to the upside? Because some things that I wonder about, I own Bitcoin and I own crypto and things like that too. My highest allocation to things is precious metals, but oftentimes people will say, well, the crypto returns can't compare to it. And you could make that argument for sure. But one thing that I don't think most people understand is the financial interest that some of the major players in the world, whether it's countries like China, whether it's banks, or whether it's major institutions or funds of some sorts, the level of financial interest that they actually have in gold and silver, which it may appear like they don't because they're manipulating the price down. But like you said, it's this funny thing where they spoof the paper market and then they buy it when the price is down. Yes. And so it's this really funny thing where it's like, if you could set the price for whatever you were selling as low as you wanted and then buy it and resell it at a later date, wouldn't you want in on that? And that's basically what their model is. And I've heard Luke Groman say that the gold market, if you took away the paper market, would look a lot like a Tesla stock or a cryptocurrency, in that once that was gone, you would see a straight vertical move. And I think that, I don't know when that happens, but I actually do believe that there is going to be a point. Either comes from the establishment losing control, a distrust in fiat currencies, or every other bubble's went and they're ready to profit off the next bubble, where they just really let it rip. And when you do really let it rip and you do look at that, I mean, you're talking about astronomically higher prices that could happen, especially if they manipulate it to the upside like that. I mean, we're talking astronomical, very quick 100, 200% moves. Do you subscribe to the philosophy of that? Obviously, you don't base your investment philosophy off that, but do you think that that's crazy talk, or do you think that something like that could occur?
No, again, I don't think I think it's almost inevitability. I mean, supply-demand fundamentals willfully assert themselves. And like David Morgan says, who you have on your show frequently, he's another one who I just look up to a lot. And he says 90% of the move comes in the last 10% of the time. And that's what I expect this time. Now, it's something like to be aware of. You said so many good things. I'm trying to think which one I should address first. But you mentioned them shorting the paper market while buying the physical market. That's what China's doing. That's what a lot of central banks are doing, and what JP Morgan is doing. And then finally, another thought that comes to mind is when it goes vertical, and if they do introduce gold back into like the actual banking system and the monetary system, it's very likely to coincide with some kind of like windfall profits tax. And that's why it's really important to have an exit strategy. I'm not talking about your physical metal, but your mining stocks and all that. I think a windfall profits tax, all kinds of things that these governments are going to try once the price gets up, orders of magnitude higher than where it is now.
So I think it was, and for everyone listening, if you haven't yet, go right there down below to link in the description and pin to the comments right there down below to sign up to Steve's free newsletter. He comes on all the time, gives amazing value to everyone. And if you want to take it a step further and really see everything he's digesting, what he's buying, what he's selling, everything like that, like I said, it is the best free newsletter out there. It's right there down below in the description and comments right there down below. But was it you that said to me, we were speculating and we were talking, and you said, I think that it's possible that there's some form of an agreement for China that has allowed China to buy these treasuries. Because everyone said, why is China buying our debt? It doesn't make any sense, especially with how smart they are. I mean, they really are, they're communists, but they are smart people. And it doesn't make any rational sense. But was it you that said, I think that, yeah, so explain this theory to me and for those that haven't heard it.
Sure. And to give credit where credit is due, this isn't my original thought. I've read it originally from Jim Rickards years ago, but it makes total logical sense. I mean, I can't prove this, but it makes total sense logically. And that's, that perhaps they're allowing the gold price to stay suppressed to allow China to accumulate it hand over fist to offset the eventual loss in value of their treasuries. They own, I think it's over $2 trillion, if I remember correctly, of U.S. treasuries. And, so you say, why would they keep buying these treasuries? Well, perhaps there's an agreement that, they'll continue to buy treasuries, keeping yields down in the U.S. while they accumulate gold hand over fist. And then eventually when the treasury market, blows up, which is going to happen, that's the biggest bubble in the world, is U.S. debt market. Their gold holdings will offset their losses. And it certainly makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so then if we stick to the original theme of this video, which is why invest in precious metals if they're manipulated, then it makes me go to the next iteration of that, which is, and tell me what you think about this. here's another reason to invest in precious metals if they're manipulated, is because ultimately it's obvious. China has a lot more gold and silver than they're publicly declaring. Everything they say, you can whether it's gold or silver, anything up, you either multiply it by a factor of 10 or you divide it by a factor of 10, depending on what it is that they're advertising. But you look at China, you look at Russia, and you look at all these different companies. I believe it was Poland that said it was yesterday or today that they're going to significantly increase their gold reserves, their bank holdings. And you look at it and you go, well, one other reason is you would think at some point the people that own the most gold, which isn't the United States. I still see people that say, well, here's the holdings that the Fort Knox has. I don't believe that for a second. And so one other reason when I think about what you say is, well, if these other players are accumulating so much of it, they're going to have a vested interest in the price rising, either to profit off it or to renegotiate for whether it's greater economic power or be involved in some form of the future currencies. What do you make of that type of an angle?
Yeah, I think it makes total logical sense. And we could even see a point where gold is reintroduced to the monetary system to introduce inflation. Because remember, inflation benefits borrowers and it hurts lenders. So who are the biggest borrowers in the world? U.S. government, and you could even just say governments across the world in general, but specifically the U.S. government. So they've got a vested interest in higher inflation. And one way to get instantly higher inflation would be to revalue the price of gold higher. Now, I don't think they want to do that soon unless they absolutely have to. But, it's certainly a viable possibility if things get bad enough.
So explain that a little bit more. Why would they do that?
So like back in 1933, for example, the price of gold was pegged at $20, roughly $20 and some change. And then they revalued it to like $35. So it's a 75% increase in the price of gold. And that coincided with a 75% loss in purchasing power of the US dollar. So inflation wipes away debts. It eats away debts. I mean, it hurts the lender, but it benefits the borrower. And the biggest borrower is the United States government.
And so they would do that in order to increase their balance sheet so their debts aren't as severe?
Yes. I mean, I'm talking like way down the road end game kind of scenario. I'm not like expecting this next week or anything.
Right.
But it's possible. They could say, some kind of new Bretton Woods agreement, which, by the way, IMF leaders are talking about a new Bretton Woods agreement. Let's say they do introduce a new monetary system where currencies around the world are backed by, say, 40% gold, and the price of gold is now revalued. It's pegged at $15,000 an ounce. Well, that would be highly inflationary. It would wipe out a lot of debts, and that would, inflation deflects the blame away from where it belongs, and it takes the blame away from these politicians, the central planners, and it pits people against each other because they don't understand it.
Got it. Yeah, understood. I had Luke Grumman on my show, and he was saying he threw out a speculative theory at the end. He said someone had showed him where in the U.S. Treasury bylaw book that it was a subline about the authority to revalue gold reserves. Mm-hmm. And he was saying one of the most interesting theories to me is, especially now that we have the Democrats in power, who want to fund Green New Deal and social programs. And then, of course, we also have 401ks and, all these things that are vastly under pensions that are vastly underfunded, retirement crisis. And he's saying one of the interesting ways to solve that, that isn't ever talked about is you kind of alluded to it, which made me bring it up, is a significant revaluation of currency to pay for it and actually profit the difference on the revaluation and use it without even needing to create more debt.
Yeah, I think I heard you speak to Luke about that, and yeah, that makes total sense to me. And again, the gold would, what you say, well, I get it. Why do they need gold though? Why can't they just, revalue the currency? Well, gold adds confidence. So at some point, if people lose complete confidence in the dollar, gold is like their last ditch resort because it adds confidence and people trust it.
So they would use that in order, let's say, as what happens in most places, right, is as this type of devaluation of currency continues to happen, people don't realize it's occurring basically until they see it in their bills. And, when you go and you read a book on Zimbabwe, or you see what's happened in Venezuela, the blame doesn't even get deflected to the politicians until people can't pay for things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then they go, wait, you guys did it. And then you're saying at that point, an option could be, here's the new price of gold, restore the confidence, offset the debts, and basically create some level of order where they're also essentially still maintaining the power of the system. So that's another reason you would say that is worth, if you have a long-term enough view, whether that's 5 years or 30 years of owning precious metals, is because you believe at some point there will be some form of this type of a revaluation.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily predicting that, but it's a real enough possibility that it's worth considering, and it's just another, thing in the bullish thesis of potential outcomes. And yeah, like you said, with Venezuela, they've lost all credibility. No one trusts the politicians anymore. So, like, what are they going to do? Come out with some kind of new scheme? No one's going to believe anything they say to introduce confidence in their currency. But if they were to say, "Hey, we're going to back it by gold," that might do it. In Venezuela particularly. And a lot of other countries are headed down that same path.
What do you think the future looks like? We're in March 2021, and we're at this point where if they just pass this $1.9 trillion stimulus, it's not going to do anything. I mean, people are 12 months behind on their rent. $1,400 isn't going to help. And then on top of that, obviously, you've got an incredible amount of people that just quite simply, they don't have work anymore. And so what do you think this is going to look like? Do you think that we'll see more printing, or do you think that this is going to stop? How do you see this unfolding over the next couple of years?
Well, I think we're going to lose a lot more freedom. We're going to lose a lot more of our purchasing power, inflation. Those are just general answers. But, I think there's not only a war on savers, there's a war on like small business owners, because all these policies hurt small businesses and everything. So the ability to go out and start your own small business, aside from maybe an internet business like you and I are doing, trying to build a brick and mortar business that competes with some mega corporation. Like these are all trends that are very troubling. And I see more people just working for big corporations where you're pretty much a slave to your job till you're 60, and maybe you can retire with some dignity down the road. I mean, these are all trends that are in place, and I think they're only going to accelerate, especially as it seems clear that central bank digital currencies, I'm not super smart on those, but that's coming, where they can track every transaction you make. These are all things that are on the horizon, and they're coming, unfortunately.
And that's why you created Silver Chartist. That's why you invest in precious metals, is because you believe that there's a lot of people that are going to get either their wealth stolen through a devaluation of currency, or they lose their ability to earn their income. And you believe that precious metals presents one of the best, and mining stocks presents one of the best opportunities to not only preserve your purchasing power, but to participate in this wealth transfer that moves from savers to essentially the borrowers, which is the government. And through that process, one of the beneficiaries of that is precious metals. And that's why you created it, correct?
Yes. I'm so glad you asked that, because really this is getting personal, but the mission of Silver Chartist isn't for everyone to go make a bunch of money. That's a means to an end. And, I believe everyone has a calling on their life. Everyone. There's something inside of you that makes you come alive, that you're meant to pursue. And it becomes hard, when you're bogged down with a 50-hour week work job, working for a job you hate. So I want people to have the time freedom to pursue the things that they're called to in life, things of eternal significance. And I think everyone's got that within them. And, if I can help someone along the way a little bit by making smart investments, that's where the real fulfillment and satisfaction comes in. And that's really the ultimate goal of Silver Chartist.
So if you're ready to take that to the next level in your life, right there down below in the description, you will see the link to the free newsletter to Silver Chartist. It's right there down below, and it's pinned to the comments right there down below. So if that speaks to you, if you are ready to participate really in what is seemingly shaping up to be the biggest wealth transfer in history as the governments intend to inflate our way out of this problem, there's going to be some beneficiaries: gold, silver, mining stocks, commodities, uranium. Steve covers all of that in his free newsletter right there down below. You'll see it pinned to the comments in the description. Make sure you hit the like button right over there on this side, right over there on this side, to send it out to more people. And thank you for coming on, and thank you for joining us, Steve.
You bet, Jake. Thank you so much. Always appreciate talking to you and connecting with your audience. You've got an awesome group following you, and great to be a small part of it. Thanks.
So comment down below, Steve rules, right there down below, if you appreciate Steve coming on. I thought this would be an important topic for us to discuss here, because you see people say, well, why would I invest in this thing? Or why should I stay having any level of allocation or investment either to physical metals or mining stocks if the price is manipulated? So hopefully this opened your mind. Hopefully this has expanded your forward thinking down the line of the possibilities that are available and out there. So make sure you sign up to Steve's free newsletter in the description and comments right there down below. And we'll see everyone next time.